I had been married to Catherine for 26 years. I thought I knew everything about her. Then a janitor at the Palmer House Hilton pulled me aside on a Thursday night and showed me security footage from the 12th floor. My wife was kissing a man I had never seen before. The janitor's hands were trembling. "I'm sorry," he said, "but you deserve the truth. Especially from me." I didn't understand that last part. Not yet. But I would. Welcome to Family Revenge Stories. I'm truly grateful you're here. Before we go deeper, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And when you reach the end, rate this story from 1 to 10. Your feedback helps me craft even stronger, more powerful stories for you. Also, a brief note. This narrative includes fictional elements woven in for storytelling and reflection. Any resemblance to real names or places is purely coincidental, but the lessons about family, trust, and consequences are very real. Thursday evenings in late September usually meant sitting in my truck outside some job site in the West Loop, reviewing blueprints, while the last contractors packed up. But this Thursday, September 26th, Catherine had asked me to pick her up from the Palmer House Hilton board meeting with the senior care executives. She'd said that morning while straightening her black dress in our bedroom mirror. Could run late. Just wait in the lobby. So there I was. Leather chair beneath the gilded ceiling, surrounded by marble columns and the faint smell of expensive candles. I scrolled through structural reports on my phone, half reading, half watching the elevator doors. My name is Grant Holloway, 55 years old. Former Naval Criminal Investigative Service, 12 years. Now I own a commercial construction firm that handles projects across 3 Illinois counties. My wife Catherine runs operations for one of the largest senior care networks in the Midwest. Our son Nolan is 21, finishing his architecture degree at Illinois Institute of Technology. A life built on hard work, trust, and 26 years of showing up for each other. The lobby was quieting down around 9:30. Most conference attendees had filtered out. A pianist played something soft near the bar. I was about to text Catherine when I noticed him. The janitor, 63, maybe 64. Gray hair cropped short, weathered face carved with deep lines from decades under fluorescent light. His uniform was clean, but worn at the elbows. He pushed a mop cart across the marble floor, but his eyes weren't on the floor. They were on me. He stopped 10 feet away. Looked around the lobby carefully, the way a man does when he's about to say something he can't take back. "Excuse me, Sia." I looked up. "Yeah?" He stepped closer. His hands gripped the mop handle, shaking. "Not from cold." The woman upstairs. Board meeting on 12. Black dress, dark hair. He paused. "Is she your wife?" My chest tightened. Not because of the question, because of the way he asked it. Like a doctor delivering results he wished were different. "That's Catherine." "Why?" He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something raw sat behind the exhaustion. "My name is Walt," he said quietly. "I work maintenance here. Tuesday through Saturday, 3 to 11. He pulled out his phone. 20 minutes ago, I was cleaning the 12th floor hallway. The door to suite 1209 was open about 3 inches. He turned the phone toward me. 12 seconds of footage. Security camera angle. Slightly grainy but clear enough. Timestamp. September 26th. 9:07 in the evening. Catherine stood just inside the doorway. A man stood with her. Tall, fit, mid-40s. Dark suit, no tie. His hand rested on her waist with casual confidence that only came from repetition. Catherine was laughing. That bright, genuine laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months. Then he leaned in. She met him halfway. The kiss wasn't quick or uncertain. It was slow, familiar, practiced. The kind that had happened dozens of times before. 12 seconds of video. 26 years of marriage. I watched it twice. My training kicked in before my emotions could. 12 years in NCIS had wired my brain a certain way. When information hits, you don't react. You observe. You catalog details while the rest of your body wants to shut down. The man's suit, custom-tailored. His watch, expensive. His posture, proprietary. Catherine's body language, relaxed, leaning into him. No hesitation, no guilt. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. I debated showing you, Walt whispered. 2 weeks I went back and forth. But if it were my family, I'd want to know, before I wasted more years on a lie. Who is he? I don't know his name. But he's been here 4 times this month. Always around the same time. Always with her. He put his phone away. I've been keeping records. Photos. Timestamps. Records. Documentation. Evidence. This man wasn't just a concerned stranger. He'd been watching, tracking, building a file. Why would a maintenance worker do that? Why do you care? I managed. Pain flickered across his face. Old, deep, carried for decades. He looked me directly in the eyes. Because you deserve the truth, he said. Especially from me. The elevator chimed before I could ask what that meant. The doors opened, and Catherine walked out, radiant. Flushed cheeks, bright eyes, confident stride. She spotted me and smiled wide. Not a trace of guilt, anywhere. Hey, babe. She kissed my cheek, took my arm. Sorry that ran so long. Let's get out of here. I looked back toward Walt. Gone. The mop cart sat abandoned near a column, floor still glistening wet. You okay? She asked. You look tired. Long day. We walked through the lobby, her heels clicking against marble, my boots silent beside hers. Outside, cool September air hit my face. Chicago hummed around us. Streetlights reflected off rain-slicked pavement. The Art Institute lions watched us pass with stone indifference. I opened her door. 26 years of muscle memory. She slid in, smoothing her dress, already talking about the meeting. Budget allocations, restructuring proposals, the consulting team. Dr. Soren was incredibly helpful tonight, she said as I pulled onto South Michigan Avenue. He really understands the senior care model. Brilliant man. I think the board's going to extend his contract through next quarter. Dr. Soren. The name landed like a blade between my ribs. I kept my hands steady on the wheel. My voice even. My face blank. She kept talking. About his insights. His recommendations. How lucky the company was to have found him. I nodded at the right moments. Asked a question about timelines. Even smiled when she touched my arm. But inside, 12 years of NCIS training were already running. The man in the suit. Sweet. 12:09. That practiced kiss. And a janitor named Walt who trembled when he said, especially from me. I filed every detail away. Dr. Soren. I would find out exactly who he was. This wasn't over. It had just begun. The drive home from the Palmer house took 42 minutes. I performed normalcy for every single one of them. Lakeshore Drive was quiet at that hour. The city skyline glittered to our left, reflected in the dark surface of Lake Michigan. Catherine sat in the passenger seat talking about board politics, about quarterly projections, about a new memory care wing the network was planning to build. Her voice was light, animated, completely at ease. We should take Nolan to that Italian place in Wicker Park when he comes home for Thanksgiving, she said, adjusting the heater vent. He loved the carbonara last time. Sure. Oh, and I've been looking at new backsplash options for the kitchen. That subway tile we talked about. I think white with gray grout would look clean. Sounds good. She reached over and squeezed my hand on the center console. Her wedding ring pressed against my knuckles. The same ring I'd slid onto her finger 26 years ago at St. Michael's Church on the north side, while her mother cried in the front pew and my sister Phoebe rolled her eyes at the length of our vows. "Thanks for picking me up tonight," Catherine said softly. "I know Thursday nights are your wind-down time. It's fine. You're quiet. Just tired. Long week." She accepted that. Why wouldn't she? 26 years of trust meant she didn't question my silences. Just like 26 years of trust meant I'd never questioned her Thursday night board meetings. Or her new perfume. Or the way she'd started putting her phone face down on every surface in the house. We pulled into the driveway at 10:17. Lincoln Park was hushed. Porch lights glowed amber along the block. A neighbor's sprinkler system clicked on somewhere in the darkness. Our house sat solid and warm, the brick two-story I'd renovated twice with my own hands. New roof 3 years ago. Kitchen remodel 5 years before that. Every improvement a deposit into a future I thought we were building together. Inside, the routine played out like it had 10,000 times before. Catherine kicked off her heels by the door. I locked up, checked the thermostat, turned off the porch light. She poured herself a glass of water in the kitchen. I let the dog out into the backyard and stood there watching him sniff along the fence while September wind carried the smell of dying leaves. Normal. Automatic. A performance so practiced, I could deliver it in my sleep. Upstairs, Catherine hummed while brushing her teeth. Some melody I didn't recognize. I watched her through the bathroom mirror, and she caught my eye, smiled. Warm, genuine, nothing hidden. "Long day for both of us," she said, rinsing her toothbrush. Nolan texted earlier. He's thinking about coming home the weekend before Thanksgiving to help with the yard. Good. The gutters need cleaning. She kissed my cheek and walked to her side of the bed. Our bed. The one we'd picked out 12 years ago at a furniture store in Schaumburg. The one where we'd whispered about Nolan's college applications, argued about paint colors, planned vacations we sometimes took and sometimes didn't. Then she did it. The thing I'd watched her do for months without ever questioning. She placed her phone under her pillow, not on the nightstand. Not beside her water glass. Under the pillow. "My alarm's too sensitive on hard surfaces," she'd explained once, months ago. "The vibration wakes me up gentler this way." I'd accepted it. Reasonable. Considerate even. The kind of small accommodation married people make without thinking. Tonight I saw it for what it was. A hiding place. I went through my own routine. Teeth. Contacts out. Phone on my nightstand. Face up. Because I had nothing to hide. I turned off my lamp and stared at the ceiling. The house settled around us. Furnace kicking on. A car passing on the street outside. The dog's nails clicking on hardwood downstairs as he found his spot on the couch he wasn't supposed to sleep on. Catherine's breathing evened out within 5 minutes. She'd always fallen asleep fast. Planes, waiting rooms, halftime of Bears games. I used to find it endearing. Tonight I found it maddening. How could she sleep so easily with another man's kiss still warm on her lips? The digital clock glowed red. 10:48. 11:22. 12:01. 1:15. At 2:11 in the morning, her phone buzzed beneath the pillow. Soft. Muffled. But I was lying 3 feet away, with every nerve firing, and I heard it like a gunshot. Catherine shifted. Her hand slid under the pillow, fingers brushing the screen. Then she smiled. A small, unconscious curve of her lips. Still asleep. Still dreaming. But smiling at whoever had just sent a message at 2 in the morning. Who makes you smile like that in your dreams, Catherine? Dr. Soren. Dark suit, no tie. That practice kiss. Sweet 12:09. I forced myself to breathe. 4 counts in, 4 hold, 4 out. Box breathing. They taught it to us at NCIS for high-stress operations. Hostage negotiations, interrogation rooms, moments when your body wanted to explode but your mission required stillness. This was a mission now. My mind began cycling through the last 8 months. Not with emotion, with analysis. The new perfume she'd started wearing in February. Floral, expensive, not her usual scent. I'd complimented it. She'd said a colleague recommended it. The gym bag in her trunk that never seemed to need fresh clothes. Her phone always face down now. Passcode changed. Notifications hidden. Work's been intense, she'd said when I'd noticed. Budget season. You know how it is. I'd believed her. Every explanation, every excuse, every perfectly reasonable lie. Because 26 years of marriage builds a kind of blindness. You stop questioning the person you trust most. You stop looking because you believe there's nothing to find. 8 months of signs I'd missed. Thursday evenings running late. Weekend conference calls that required privacy. The way she'd started showering immediately when she got home, before even saying hello. Small changes, invisible individually. Devastating when assembled into a pattern. And I was a man who'd spent 12 years reading patterns for the United States Navy. The rage came in waves. Hot. Corrosive. Demanding action. I wanted to shake her awake. Throw that phone across the room. Demand to know who Dr. Soren was and how long she'd been lying to my face. But under the rage ran something colder. Something trained. In NCIS, we had a saying. The agent who reacts first loses the case. The one who gathers evidence and strikes at the right moment wins the conviction. Emotion clouds judgment. Patience builds cases. If I confronted her now, what did I have? One 12-second video from a janitor with mysterious motives. She'd deny it, explain it away, accuse me of paranoia, and I'd have shown my hand before knowing the game. No, I needed more. I needed professional surveillance, financial records, a complete picture. I needed someone I could trust with my life. Morning came slow. 6:33. Catherine's alarm vibrated under her pillow. She stretched, yawned, rolled toward me with sleepy eyes. Morning, babe. Sleep okay? Like a rock. Downstairs I made coffee, scrambled eggs, set the table. She came down in a robe, hair damp, talking about Nolan's Thanksgiving visit and whether we should repaint the guest room. I nodded. Asked about paint colors, poured her orange juice. A flawless performance. After she left for work, I stood in my home office and stared at the wall. Then I picked up my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in 3 years. A man I'd served with at NCIS. A man who now ran his own investigations firm in Chicago. A man who owed me nothing but would come anyway because that's what partners did. I pressed call. It rang twice. Grant Holloway. The voice was flat, alert. No warmth wasted on pleasantries. Who's the target? Some friendships don't need warming up. My wife, I said. She's having an affair. I need to know everything. A pause. 2 seconds. Then Miles Crenshaw said, Wicker Park. Cafe Estrada. 90 minutes. He hung up. That was Miles. No sympathy, no questions that could wait, no wasted syllables. We'd spent 4 years together at NCIS headquarters in Washington before I transferred to the Great Lakes field office, and he left the service entirely. He'd gone private, opened an investigations firm in Chicago specializing in corporate fraud, insurance scams, and the kind of domestic cases that paid well because the clients were desperate and the evidence was ugly. I hadn't called him in 3 years. Not since he'd helped me run background checks on a subcontractor who turned out to be laundering money through construction invoices. But some partnerships survive distance, the kind forged in windowless rooms at 2 a.m, building cases against people who thought they were untouchable. Cafe Estrada sat on a quiet block in Wicker Park, sandwiched between a vintage record shop and a tattoo studio. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, the smell of dark roast and baked goods. I arrived 15 minutes early. Miles was already there. He looked the same. 47, lean, buzz cut going gray at the temples. Dark eyes that processed information the way a scanner reads barcodes. Fast, thorough, missing nothing. He wore a plain black jacket over a plain black shirt. No jewelry, no logos, nothing memorable. The kind of man who could sit in any room and disappear into the furniture. He didn't stand when I approached. Just gestured to the chair across from him and slid a coffee in my direction. Talk. I gave him the outline. The Palmer House footage Walt had shown me. The 12-second video. Catherine's body language. 8 months of warning signs. The phone hidden under her pillow. The 2:11 in the morning text that made her smile in her sleep. Dr. Soren. Miles listened without moving. When I finished, he asked sharp questions. One after another. Clinical. Efficient. Her workplace. Does she control budgets? She's COO. Oversees operations for 12 senior care facilities across the Midwest. Joint accounts? 3. Checking, savings, retirement. Plus her own 401k. Children? Nolan. 21. Architecture student at IIT. Lives on campus. Does she know you know? No. Does the janitor have more footage? He said he's been keeping records. Photos? Timestamps? I don't know the full extent. Miles nodded once. Pulled out a small notebook and wrote something in a shorthand only he could read. You're calm, he said without looking up. ex-NCIS. Most husbands aren't. Most husbands are already throwing furniture by this point. Most husbands don't know that throwing furniture loses cases. Something like approval crossed his face. He closed the notebook. What exactly do you want? Everything. Who this man is. How long it's been going on. Where they meet. How often. And financials. Hers. His. Anything that connects them beyond the bedroom. Financials. He looked up. You think there's money involved? I don't know yet. But Catherine handles multi-million-dollar budgets. If someone's close enough to kiss her in a hotel suite, I want to know if they're close enough to touch our accounts. Miles studied me for a long moment. Then he pulled out a single sheet of paper. Contract. Simple, clean. 1 page. $200 an hour plus expenses. Standard timeline is 2 weeks for a full profile. I'll pay $300 if you do it in 1. He didn't blink. 1 week. No guarantees on depth if she's careful. But I'll prioritize identity and financial connections. I signed the contract. He folded it into his jacket. Updates via encrypted email. Password rotates every 24 hours. Don't open anything on a shared device. Don't change your behavior at home. Don't search his name on any browser she could access. He stood. And Grant, whatever you're feeling right now, bury it. If she senses anything different about you, she'll start covering tracks. I've seen it 100 times. The smart ones always clean up when they feel the temperature change. I've already started burying it. Good, keep going. He left without another word. I sat in Cafe Estrada for 20 more minutes, drinking coffee that had gone cold, watching pedestrians pass the window without seeing any of them. 3 days later, the first report arrived. Tuesday evening. Catherine was on the couch watching a medical drama. I was in my home office, door cracked open, one ear on the television, and both eyes on my laptop. At 7:51, the encrypted email landed. A separate text delivered the daily password. I entered it carefully, 1 character at a time. The report opened. Miles had found him. Dr. Victor Soren, 46 years old. Officially listed as an independent healthcare management consultant, specializing in senior care facility restructuring. Based in a luxury condominium on East Lake Shore Drive in the Gold Coast neighborhood. No hospital affiliation. No surgical credentials. Not a practicing physician at all, despite the title. Then the activity log. Monday. Victor Soren checked into room 1215 at the Fairmont Chicago on South Michigan Avenue at 1:45 in the afternoon. Catherine arrived at 2:30. She exited at 5:15. 2 hours and 45 minutes. I read it 3 times. 2 hours and 45 minutes. While I'd been at a construction site in Evanston reviewing foundation specs, while I'd texted her at 4 asking what she wanted for dinner, while she'd replied, "Anything easy." Long day. Long day. The financial section was preliminary. Miles was still digging. But one note stopped me cold. Irregular transfers detected in joint savings account. Small amounts. Recurring pattern. Requires deeper analysis. Will report within 48 hours. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, stared at the ceiling. From the living room, Catherine called out, "Babe, come watch this. The surgeon's wife just found out about the affair." It's so dramatic. The irony should have been funny. It wasn't. I walked to the doorway. Catherine lay curled on the couch under the blanket her mother had knitted before she passed. The TV cast blue light across her face. She looked comfortable, content, completely at ease. A woman with no guilt, or a woman who'd gotten very good at hiding it. "Pour me some wine?" she asked without looking up. I poured 2 glasses of Pinot Noir. Sat beside her. She leaned her head against my shoulder like she'd done for 2 decades. On screen, a fictional wife discovered a fictional betrayal and screamed at a fictional husband. Dramatic, satisfying, unrealistic. I sipped my wine and said nothing. Later that night, after Catherine fell asleep with her phone safely tucked beneath her pillow, I went back to my office and read Miles's final note one more time. Financial irregularities are not consistent with normal spending patterns. Transfers appear structured to avoid detection thresholds. This is not standard affair behavior. Recommend expanding scope to include corporate entity searches and LLC filings. Initial assessment. This is not just an affair. Something else is happening with the money. Not just an affair. Something worse. I stared at those words until the screen went dark. Then I thought about the janitor. About Walt. About the way he'd trembled when he showed me that video. About the careful documentation he'd mentioned. About those 5 words that still didn't make sense. Especially from me. A janitor who kept records like an investigator. A stranger who apologized like it was personal. A man who knew more than he was saying. Tomorrow, I was going back to the Palmer house. Not for Catherine. For him. I went back to the Palmer house on Wednesday. Not for Catherine. Not for Dr. Soren. For the janitor who knew too much and apologized like it was personal. I found Walt on the 3rd floor, guiding a cleaning cart down the hallway outside a row of conference rooms. He saw me from 30 feet away and stopped. No surprise on his face. Like he'd been expecting me to come back. Like he'd been counting the days. "We need to talk," I said. "Not here." He studied me for a moment. The same careful, assessing look he'd given me in the lobby 6 days ago. Then he nodded. "There's a bar 3 blocks east. O'Malley's. I'm off in 20 minutes. O'Malley's was the kind of place that had probably looked the same since 1972. Dim lighting, scarred wooden bar top, old-style beer signs glowing yellow against dark paneling. The air carried the ghost of decades of cigarette smoke baked into the walls despite the smoking ban. A handful of regulars hunched over drinks and minded their own history. The kind of bar where nobody looked up when strangers walked in and nobody remembered faces when they left. We took a booth in the back corner. Both ordered beer. Neither touched it. "I hired a private investigator," I said without preamble. "Former NCIS colleague. He confirmed everything you showed me. The affair, the hotel rooms, the timeline." I leaned forward. "But that's not why I'm here." Walt sat motionless. His hands rested on the table, weathered, scarred along the knuckles. Working hands. His jaw worked slowly, like a man chewing words and deciding which ones to release. "I'm here because of what you said in the lobby. Especially from me. That's not something a stranger says. That's not how a parking garage attendant talks to a man he's never met." I held his gaze. "So, who are you, Walt?" And why does any of this feel personal to you? Silence stretched between us. The bar's jukebox played something country and forgotten. A glass clinked somewhere behind the bar. Walt picked up his beer, held it without drinking, and set it down again. Because it is personal, he said finally. His voice was lower now, rougher, like the words were being pulled from somewhere deep and locked. It's the most personal thing I've ever done. Then tell me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph. Old, creased at the edges. Colors faded the way photos fade when they've been carried in wallets and shoeboxes for decades. He set it on the table between us. A woman. Young, maybe late 20s. Dark hair, gentle eyes, a smile that looked like it came easily. She held a baby in one arm. A toddler stood beside her, gripping her free hand. The toddler had dark hair and wide, serious eyes. I looked at the woman's face. Something stirred. Not recognition exactly. Something deeper. Something cellular. Her name was Margaret. Walt said quietly. Margaret Ellen Brogan. The air left my lungs. Margaret. My mother's name was Margaret. She married young. Walt continued. His eyes stayed on the photograph. Her first husband was David Holloway. Good man. Carpenter. They had a son together when she was 24. He looked up at me. That son was you, Grant. I couldn't speak. My hands went flat on the table. David died when you were 8. Heart attack on a job site. No warning. Margaret was 32, widowed, raising a boy alone. She struggled. Financially. Emotionally. 2 years later, she met Richard Brogan. Walt's voice hardened on the name. Not anger exactly. Something older and heavier than anger. Richard was a sales manager, decent income, steady job, charming when he needed to be. He married Margaret when you were 9. Walt paused. And I was born 11 months later. The booth seemed to shrink. The bar noise faded to static. I stared at the photograph. The toddler gripping Margaret's hand. Wide, serious eyes. That toddler was me, the baby in her arm. That's you, I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Walt nodded slowly. I'm your brother, Grant. Half-brother. Same mother. Different fathers. The floor didn't drop out from under me. It dissolved. Like standing on ice and feeling it turn to water beneath your feet. Slow and absolute and irreversible. Richard didn't want you, Walt said. And each word landed like a stone dropped into still water. You weren't his. You were David's son. A reminder that Margaret had loved someone before him. He resented you from the day he moved in. Memories surfaced. Fragments I'd buried for decades. Richard's voice, sharp and dismissive. The way he'd look past me at dinner like I was furniture. The locked bedroom door when I'd knock to say goodnight. The feeling, constant and formless, of being unwelcome in my own home. When you were 10, Walt continued, Richard told Margaret he wanted you out. He said if she didn't send you to live with your grandparents, he'd leave. Take me with him, file for custody, and make sure she never saw either of us again. My throat tightened. She chose him. She chose survival. Walt's voice cracked for the first time. She had no money, no job, a 1-year-old baby. Richard controlled everything. She begged him to let you stay, begged for months. He threatened lawyers, threatened to disappear with me. He wiped his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. She sent you to your grandparents because she believed it was the only way to keep both her sons alive, even if it meant losing one. I remembered the day. October. Cold. My grandmother's house in Rockford smelled like mothballs and lavender soap. Margaret knelt on the front porch, holding my face in both hands, crying so hard she couldn't speak. I was 10. I didn't understand why she was leaving me. I waited by the window for 3 weeks, believing she'd come back. She never did. Richard cut every connection, Walt said. Changed the phone number. Moved us to a different neighborhood. Told me my brother had gone to live with relatives because he wanted to, that you'd chosen to leave. I was 10 years old, I know. Walt's voice was barely audible. I didn't learn the truth until I was 15. Found a box of letters Margaret had written to your grandparents. Letters Richard had intercepted and never mailed. She'd been trying to reach you for 5 years. Letters. My mother had written letters that never arrived. 5 years of silence that I'd interpreted as abandonment. 5 years of believing she'd forgotten me. Margaret got sick when I was 18, Walt said. Ovarian cancer. By the time they found it, it had spread everywhere. She lasted 2 years. He picked up the photograph. Ran his thumb across Margaret's face. She talked about you every single day until the end. Your name was the last word she said. Not Richard's. Not mine. He set the photo down carefully, like laying down something sacred. She never forgave herself for letting him send you away. And Grant? Neither did I. The jukebox had gone silent. The bar hummed with low conversation and the clink of glasses. 2 brothers sat across from each other for the first time in 45 years. One had known about the other for decades. One had just learned the ground beneath his entire life had shifted. I looked at Walt's face. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw it. The jawline. The way his brow furrowed when he was thinking. The shape of his hands. My mother's features. In a stranger's face. She died when I was 20, Walt said. I've been looking for you ever since. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The jukebox had started again, something with a steel guitar and a man singing about roads not taken. The regulars at the bar drank their drinks and kept their eyes forward. Nobody looked our way. Nobody cared about 2 strangers sitting in silence across a table of untouched beers and a faded photograph. I was the first to break it. How did you find me? Walt picked up his beer for the first time. Took a slow sip. Set it down with the care of a man organizing his thoughts. After Margaret died, I had nothing. Richard disappeared within 6 months. Didn't even pretend to grieve. Just packed his things one night and drove to Florida. I never saw him again. He turned the glass slowly on the table. I was 20 years old. Alone. No family. No money. Worked my way through community college. Got a criminal justice degree. Became a licensed private investigator. That explained the records. The documentation. The timestamps. I spent 15 years searching for you, Grant. On and off. Margaret's letters mentioned your grandparents in Rockford, but they'd passed by the time I started looking. You joined the Navy, moved around, changed addresses every 2 years the way military people do. Every time I got close to a lead, it went cold. He reached into his jacket again, pulled out a folded document, set it on the table beside the photograph. 4 years ago, I took one of those DNA ancestry tests, mostly out of curiosity, partly out of hope. He unfolded the paper. 3 weeks later, I got a match. I looked down. A genetic testing report. 2 names. 2 sets of markers. And at the bottom, in clinical black typeface, probability of half-sibling relationship, 99.9 to 4%. 99.9 to 4. Not a possibility. A certainty. I couldn't believe it at first, Walt said. After 15 years of dead ends, there you were. Grant Holloway. Chicago. Owner of Holloway. Commercial construction. Married. 1 son. He paused. I found your company website, saw your photo on the About page, and I saw Margaret's face looking back at me. I knew that feeling now. I'd seen the same thing minutes ago when I'd looked at Walt across this table and recognized my mother's jawline in a stranger. Why didn't you come to me? My voice came out rougher than I intended. 4 years. You had my name, my address, my company. You could have walked into my office any morning. Walt's expression crumbled. Just for a second. Then he rebuilt it. The way men who've carried pain for decades learn to do. And say what? His voice was hoarse. Hi. I'm Walt. I'm your brother. The one who grew up in the house you got thrown out of. The one our mother kept while she sent you away. He shook his head. I was terrified you'd hate me. That you'd look at me and see everything Richard stole from you. Everything Margaret couldn't give you, because she was too busy raising me. That's not your fault. I know that now. I didn't know it then. Guilt doesn't follow logic, Grant. It follows blood. He drained half his beer. Wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. So instead of introducing myself, I watched. From a distance. I learned your routine. What time you left for work. Where your job sites were. Where Catherine went during the day. I told myself, I was just making sure you were okay. That Margaret's firstborn was safe and happy, and living the life she'd wanted for him. You were surveilling me. I was protecting you. The only way I knew how. He met my eyes. Steady now. The trembling from the lobby was gone, replaced by something harder. Resolve. 6 months ago, I took a maintenance job at the Palmer House. Part-time. 3 to 11. Tuesday through Saturday. I knew Catherine attended board meetings there regularly. I figured if I worked the building, I'd eventually cross paths with you. He paused. Instead, I crossed paths with her. My stomach tightened. What did you see? 4 months ago. Late May. I was cleaning the 12th floor hallway after a conference let out. Most of the rooms were empty. Suite 1209 was supposed to be vacant. His jaw clenched. The door was open. I saw Catherine inside with a man. They were standing close. He had his hand on her back. She was laughing. That laugh. I kept hearing it. The bright, genuine one that used to be mine. At first, I thought maybe it was innocent. Colleague. Friend. But something felt wrong. The way they stood together. The way she looked at him. I've done enough domestic surveillance in my career to recognize the body language of an affair. You kept watching. I kept records. Walt's voice shifted into something harder, more professional. The private investigator emerging from beneath the janitor's uniform. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she met him. Same floor. Same suite. Same window between 6 and 9:30 in the evening. I photographed them 4 times. Logged dates. Arrival times. Departure times. Documented physical contact through the door gap. He pulled out his phone. Scrolled through a folder of images. Handed it to me. Dozens of photos. Catherine entering the Palmer house at different dates. Catherine in the elevator. Catherine outside suite 1209. And Victor Sorin. The same man from the video. Tall, dark suit, confident posture. His hand on her waist. Her hand on his chest. Laughing. Leaning in. Comfortable. 4 months of evidence. Organized, time-stamped, methodical. Not the work of a janitor. The work of a trained investigator who'd spent a career building cases. I could have shown you sooner, Walt said, taking the phone back. Part of me wanted to. Part of me still wasn't sure I had the right. Who was I to destroy your marriage? A brother you didn't know existed? A stranger who'd been watching you from the shadows for 4 years? What changed? I saw how happy you looked. His voice cracked. That Saturday in the lobby when you came to pick her up, you were scrolling through your phone, waiting for her. Completely trusting. And upstairs, she was kissing someone else. He pressed his palms flat on the table. I thought about Margaret. About how Richard lied to her for years. About how she spent her whole life wishing she'd known the truth sooner. And I decided. He looked at me directly. I couldn't protect you from Richard, but I could protect you from this. Something shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly. Not reconciliation. Something more fundamental. Recognition. 2 men shaped by the same woman's love, broken by the same family's failures, sitting across from each other for the first time in 45 years. "There's more," Walt said. He reached into his bag, a worn canvas messenger bag that had seen better years, and pulled out a thick manila folder. "About your wife, about the money, about what Victor Sorin really is." I looked at the folder, then at Walt. "Your investigator flagged financial irregularities," he said. "I found worse. Much worse. Victor Sorin isn't just sleeping with your wife, Grant. He's stealing from you, and she's helping him do it." The bar noise faded to nothing. "I've been building a file for 4 months. Everything's at my apartment." He paused. "And there's a woman in Minneapolis who's been building one for 8 years. A woman whose mother didn't survive what Victor Sorin did to her." He slid the folder across the table. "You need to see my apartment. Tonight." Walt's apartment in Pilsen sat on the 3rd floor of an old brick building, squeezed between a taqueria and a laundromat. The hallway smelled like cumin and damp plaster. No elevator. The stairs creaked with every step. He unlocked the door and stepped aside to let me in first. I took 2 steps and stopped. The apartment was small, clean, sparse. A kitchen barely wide enough for 1 person. A couch that doubled as a bed. A coffee maker that looked older than both of us. But the living room wall, the wall facing the front door, it was covered. Floor to ceiling, photographs. Dozens of them. Some printed from a color printer. Some developed from what looked like an actual camera. Surveillance shots taken from distance and angles that spoke of professional training. Between the photos were printed documents, bank statements, business registrations, news clippings, and timeline charts connected by red string that ran from pin to pin like veins on a body. In the center, an 8x10 photograph. Dr. Victor Sorin. Confident smile. Dark suit. Standing outside what looked like a conference hall. The kind of photo you'd find on a corporate website. Handsome, polished, trustworthy. "Jesus," I whispered. Walt closed the door behind us. "I know how it looks. But this is how investigations work. You map everything until the pattern shows." I moved closer. Drawn to the upper left corner, where the earliest dates were pinned. May 23rd. Catherine entering the Palmer House lobby at 6:12 in the evening. Another photo of her exiting at 9:08. 3 hours. June 14th. Catherine and Victor at a restaurant on Randolph Street, his hand on hers across the table. June 29th. Her car parked outside a building on East Lake Shore Drive, Gold Coast. For 4 hours during what she'd told me was a budget planning session. The pattern repeated with mechanical precision. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Hotels, restaurants, his condo. 4 months of documentation laid out in chronological order. Each date a small betrayal. Each photograph another brick in the wall of evidence. 4 months, I said. You documented all of this yourself. Old habits. Once an investigator, always an investigator. Walt stood beside me, arms crossed. But the photos aren't why I brought you here. He pointed to the center right section of the wall. Business documents. I leaned in. A State of Illinois LLC registration certificate. Heartland Senior Solutions LLC. Filed March 15th of this year. My eyes traced to the signatures at the bottom. 2 names. Catherine Holloway. Member. Victor Sorin. Managing member. My wife had co-signed a company with her lover. On paper, it's a healthcare consulting firm, Walt said. They provide operational restructuring services for senior care facilities. Sounds legitimate. It even has a few real contracts. He pulled a stack of bank statements from a folder on the coffee table and handed them to me. Look at the transfers. I flipped through the pages. Highlighted lines jumped out. $5,000. $12,000. $8,000. $15,000. $7,000. Over and over. From an account number I recognized. Our joint savings. How much? My voice sounded like it belonged underground. $250,000. Over 6 months. Small increments designed to stay below automatic fraud detection thresholds. Walt's tone was clinical now. Professional. The private investigator fully emerged. Each transfer corresponds to an invoice from Heartland Senior Solutions for consulting services rendered to facilities Catherine oversees. The invoices are real. The services are inflated by 300 to 400%. $250,000. Gone. Siphoned from the account we'd built together over 26 years, the account meant for retirement, for Nolan's future, for the life we were supposed to live after the work was done. There's more, Walt said. He moved to the right side of the wall. A different section. Different cities. Different women. 5 photographs. 5 faces. All women. All professional looking. All in their late 40s to early 50s. All with that polished, confident appearance of women who ran departments and managed budgets and made decisions that affected hundreds of people. Walt pointed to each one in sequence. Minneapolis. 2012. Linda Marsh. Chief Financial Officer of a senior care network. Victor targeted her the same way. Affair. LLC. Inflated invoices. $380,000. He moved his finger. Indianapolis. 2014. $290,000. Next. Detroit. 2017. $310,000. Next. Milwaukee. 2019. $275,000. Next. Cleveland. 2021. $245,000. He stepped back so I could see the full scope. 5 cities, 5 women, 12 years. The same model repeating like a virus spreading from host to host. Total confirmed losses across all victims. Walt said quietly. $3.4 million. I stared at the wall. The red string connecting cities, connecting faces, connecting bank statements. A map of one man's predatory career laid out in photographs and paperwork. He targets women in healthcare administration, Walt continued. Specifically senior care. Women between 45 and 52. Married. Access to significant assets or institutional budgets. Marriages that have gone stale. He paused. He finds the ones who feel invisible. Makes them feel seen. Then, he drains them. My eyes went back to the Minneapolis photo. Linda Marsh. She looked kind. Gentle smile. Warm eyes. The type of woman who probably remembered every employee's birthday. What happened to her? I asked. Though something in my gut already knew. Walt was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Softer. Like a man approaching a wound he'd carried for a long time. After Victor left Minneapolis with her money, the internal investigation at her company blamed Linda for the financial discrepancies. She lost her position. Her husband filed for divorce when the affair came out. She signed an NDA to avoid criminal prosecution. He paused. 2 years later, she drove to a parking lot outside the facility where she used to work. Sat in her car. And didn't come home. The room went very still. She had a daughter, Walt said. Elena Marsh. 38 now. Psychologist. Lives in Minneapolis. He turned to face me. After her mother died, Elena found Linda's files. Letters, bank records, the NDA, everything Victor had done. And she started building her own investigation. 8 years? 8 years. 6 confirmed victims, including your wife. Court records. Financial documents. Witness accounts. Elena has been waiting for someone with enough evidence and enough strength to finally bring Victor Sorin down. Walt met my eyes. When I contacted her last week and explained your situation, she didn't hesitate. What did she say? She said, "I'll be on the next flight." Walt glanced at the clock on the kitchen wall. She lands at O'Hare tomorrow morning. 7:45. She's bringing everything. 8 years of documentation. I turn back to the wall. 5 women's faces look back at me. 5 lives dismantled by the same man who was currently dismantling mine. And one of those women, Linda Marsh, hadn't survived it. This isn't just fraud, I said. He killed her. Maybe not with his hands, but he killed her. Yes, Walt said simply. He did. I stood in that small apartment in Pilsen, staring at 12 years of predation pinned to a wall, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. This was no longer about my marriage, no longer about Catherine's betrayal, or my broken trust, or the money stolen from our savings. This was about stopping a man who destroyed women's lives as a business model. And tomorrow morning, the daughter of his first victim was coming to help me do it. My older sister Phoebe had spent 30 years dismantling marriages for a living. She'd never imagined she'd have to dismantle her brother's. Her office sat on the 14th floor of a glass tower in the Loop, overlooking the Chicago River. Corner suite, mahogany desk, diplomas, and bar certifications along one wall. The kind of office you earned after 3 decades of winning custody battles and carving up joint assets with surgical precision. I called her Friday morning. Family matter. Urgent. Come now, she said. Nothing else. Phoebe was 59. 4 years older. Sharp-featured. Silver hair she'd stopped coloring years ago. Gray makes opposing counsel underestimate me, she'd said once. By the time they realize their mistake, I've already taken the house. Beneath the polish, she was still the girl who'd punched Ricky DeLuca for pushing me off the swings in 4th grade. She closed the door, sat down, folded her hands, waited. I told her everything. The Palmer House video. Walt, the half-brother born from our mother's second marriage to the man who'd thrown me out at 10. The DNA test. The wall of surveillance photographs in a Pilsen apartment. Catherine's 8-month affair with Dr. Victor Sorin. The LLC, Heartland Senior Solutions, co-signed by my wife and her lover. $250,000 siphoned through inflated consulting invoices. 5 previous victims across 5 cities. Linda Marsh in Minneapolis, who'd lost everything and then lost her life. $3.4 million stolen. Elena Marsh flying in tomorrow with 8 years of documentation. Phoebe didn't interrupt. Her face moved through shock, anger, then something colder. The look she wore in courtrooms before dismantling a hostile witness. When I finished, she said one word. Bastards. Then she opened her laptop. Here's where you stand. Documented adultery, combined with financial fraud, gives you extraordinary leverage in asset division. The LLC is the key. Catherine co-signed a business entity with her lover and used marital assets to fund it through fraudulent invoices. That's not just adultery. That's financial misconduct. Theft of marital assets. And if any transactions cross state lines electronically, we're looking at federal wire fraud. 5 to 10 years. She typed while she talked. Catherine didn't just cheat on you. She committed crimes. The divorce will not be a negotiation. It will be a dismantling. Then she pulled up something old, a scanned document with yellowed edges. Turned the laptop toward me. Do you remember refinancing the house 12 years ago? Vaguely. I handled the paperwork. And I found something Mom had inserted into the original mortgage structure. She pointed to a highlighted paragraph near the bottom. A protection clause. I leaned forward and read. In the event that the marriage dissolves under proven infidelity by either party, the estate interest reverts entirely to the non-offending spouse. The offending party forfeits all claim to the property and its equity. I read it twice. Mom did this 22 years ago. When you first bought the house, she insisted I include it as a condition of her contributing to the down payment. Phoebe's voice softened for the first time. She never told you. She asked me not to. But she wanted it there. Margaret. The woman forced to send me away at 10. The woman who'd written letters for 5 years that never arrived. The woman who died saying my name. She'd still found a way to protect me. She knew men could fail, Phoebe said quietly. She'd lived it. Richard, your father dying young. She wanted to make sure you wouldn't lose your home the way she lost hers. 22 years ago, my mother had planted a shield I didn't know existed. 2 decades after her death, it was about to save me. Phoebe closed the document and opened a legal template. Monday morning. I file for divorce, adultery, and financial misconduct. Simultaneously, emergency motion to freeze all joint accounts. With this evidence, the judge approves same day. Catherine can't touch another dollar without court authorization. The LLC? I coordinate with the FBI. Wire fraud case. Catherine becomes a cooperating witness or a co-defendant. Her choice. She typed faster. The house. $800,000 in equity. Yours entirely under mom's clause. Retirement accounts. $1.5 million combined. You keep 1.2. Catherine retains her 401k, approximately $180,000. Construction business. $500,000. Solely yours. No alimony. At-fault divorce plus financial fraud means she walks away with almost nothing. She paused. Looked at me over her reading glasses. Not as attorney. As sister. What do you want, Grant? Not the legal answer. I want the house. I want every dollar back. And I want her to understand exactly what she destroyed. Good. She resumed typing. Judge Whitaker owes me a favor. Emergency hearing Monday afternoon. We have the weekend to finalize. The machinery of divorce spinning up with quiet, devastating efficiency. Then she stopped. Set her glasses on the desk. What about Nolan? He's 21. No custody issues. That's not what I'm asking. Her eyes were careful, measuring. You said Catherine hid this affair for 8 months. That she's been dishonest about fundamental things. A pause. Has she been dishonest about anything else? Anything older? The question hung like smoke. What are you asking me, Phoebe? I'm asking if you've ever checked Nolan's blood type against yours. The room went quiet. Ventilation hum. Traffic 14 floors below. The river moving silently past glass and steel. No, I haven't. Have you considered it? I hadn't. Not once in 21 years. Nolan looked like Catherine. Her smile, her quick laugh, her way of tilting his head when listening. I'd never had reason to question. But now, after 8 months of lies, after $250,000 stolen, after learning the woman I'd trusted for 26 years was capable of deceptions I couldn't have imagined. Get tested, Phoebe said quietly. Before we file, you need to know, I left her office with a legal strategy, a court date, and a question I'd never thought to ask. Have you checked? The words followed me down 14 floors, through the lobby, into the parking garage. Past the construction sites I'd built. Past the schools Nolan had attended. Past the parks where I'd taught him to throw a football and ride a bike and be the kind of man who showed up for people. Have you checked? I hadn't. But tomorrow morning, Elena Marsh was landing at O'Hare with 8 years of evidence against the man who was destroying my family. And sometime between meeting the daughter of a woman who didn't survive Victor Sorin and filing for divorce on Monday, I would take a DNA test that would either confirm 21 years of fatherhood or uncover the deepest lie of all. Elena Marsh walked into the Lincoln Park coffee shop carrying a banker's box and 8 years of grief. She looked like a woman who had stopped crying a long time ago and started building weapons instead. Saturday morning, 9:15. Autumn light slanted through tall windows. The cafe smelled like fresh espresso and warm bread. A handful of early risers tapped at laptops. Peaceful. Ordinary. The kind of morning that had no business hosting the conversation we were about to have. She was 38. Dark hair pulled tight. Black jacket, no jewelry. professional in a way that spoke of navigating rooms full of people who underestimated her. But her eyes told the real story. Brown and sharp and carrying something heavier than a banker's box. The kind of exhaustion that came from surviving something that should have destroyed you and choosing to keep going anyway. She set the box on the table like evidence at a trial. Sat down, wrapped both hands around her coffee. Walt explained everything, she said. Your wife. The LLC. The money. She met my eyes. I know the pattern, Grant. I've lived inside it for 10 years. Tell me what happened. She took a breath. The kind you take before stepping off a ledge. My mother was Linda Marsh, Chief Financial Officer of Lakeview Senior Living Network in Minneapolis. 15 facilities, 900 employees, $60 million annual budget. Elena paused. She was also 51, married 27 years, to a man who'd stopped noticing her a decade earlier, and quietly terrified that nobody would ever see her again. I recognized that fear. I'd watched something like it grow in Catherine without knowing what I was looking at. Victor arrived in 2011. Consulting contract with Lakeview. Restructuring specialist. Charming, confident, focused entirely on my mother. Elena's mouth tightened. He had a gift for making women feel like the center of everything, like they were the only person in the room who mattered. The affair started within 4 months. By 6 months, he pitched the business idea. Medical supply company. Better equipment. Lower costs. He called it a partnership. She opened the box and pulled out a folder. My mother invested $380,000. Her entire inheritance from my grandmother. Documents spread across the table. LLC registration. Bank transfers. Invoices with pricing structures inflated by 300 to 400%. The same architecture Walt had shown me on his wall. The company was real on paper. The equipment existed, but the money flowed into accounts my mother couldn't access. By the time she started asking questions, Victor had structured everything to make her look complicit. What happened? Internal audit. Victor's lawyers convinced the board it was mutual misconduct. My mother signed an NDA to avoid prosecution. Elena's voice went flat. The only way to tell this part without breaking. She lost her position. Her husband filed for divorce. The inheritance, the career, the reputation, everything she'd built for 30 years. Gone in 6 months. Elena placed a photograph on the table. A woman in her early 50s. Kind eyes. Warm smile. The type of face you'd trust with anything. This is my mother. Elena set something beside the photograph. A photocopy of a handwritten note. 3 lines on plain paper. I didn't read the words. 2 years after Victor left Minneapolis, she drove to the parking lot outside Lakeview, the building where she'd worked for 18 years. Elena's hand rested on the photograph. She didn't come home. The cafe kept moving. Espresso machine hissing. Someone laughing by the counter. The world doesn't stop for grief. It just keeps going while you stand still. After the funeral, I found her files. Shoebox in her closet. Bank records, screenshots of Victor's messages, drafts of letters to lawyers she never sent. Elena straightened. She'd been building a case, alone. Quietly, she ran out of time before she ran out of evidence. She opened the banker's box fully. Folders organized by colored tabs, each labeled with a city. Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and in fresh marker on a new tab, Chicago. 8 years, Elena said. I continued what she started. Every victim, every pattern. She pulled out a single sheet and slid it across the table. A comparison chart. Text messages arranged in 6 columns. 6 women. 6 cities. The messages were identical. You're the only one who truly understands me. Victor to Linda. Minneapolis. 2011. You're the only one who truly understands me. Victor to his victim in Indianapolis. 2014. The same sentence. Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland. Word for word. Copy and paste. 6 women who each believed they were the exception. 6 women who received the exact same love letter, distributed like a mass email. At the bottom, a 7th column. Chicago, Catherine Holloway. You're the only one who truly understands me. My wife. The same words. The same manufactured intimacy. The same lie. Recycled across a decade. And 6 cities. He didn't love your wife, Elena said quietly. He doesn't love anyone. Women aren't partners to Victor. They're accounts. He opens them, drains them, closes them, and relocates. She placed the comparison sheet on top of Linda's photograph. Mother and evidence. Layered together. My mother believed she was special. That what they had was rare. Elena looked at me. Your wife believes the same thing right now. And if nobody stops him, another woman in another city will believe it next year. And the year after that. What do you need from me? Someone who can get Victor on tape admitting what he's done. She leaned forward. Catherine is the only person close enough to him right now to make him talk. If she wears a wire and gets him to confess, we have enough for federal prosecution. Not just your case, all of them. Every city. Every victim. Every dollar. She'd have to turn on someone she thinks she loves. She'd have to face the truth about someone who never loved her. Elena closed the box. There's a difference. Catherine was the key. The only person who could walk into a room with Victor Sorin and make him feel safe enough to say the things he'd never say to anyone else. But getting Catherine to cooperate meant leverage. The divorce filing, the fraud charges, the threat of prison, and before any of that, there was Phoebe's question. The one that had been sitting in my chest since yesterday afternoon, growing heavier with every hour. Have you checked? We'll stop him, Elena, I said. For your mother. For all of them. She studied me for a long moment. I've waited 8 years for someone to say that and mean it. She paused. Do you mean it? Yes. Then let's finish this. I walked her to her rental car. She drove toward her hotel with the banker's box on the passenger seat. 8 years of evidence. 8 years of a daughter turning grief into a weapon sharp enough to cut through a decade of lies. I sat in my truck and stared at the steering wheel. Elena had given me the ammunition. Phoebe had given me the legal framework. Walt had given me the truth about my family. Miles had given me surveillance and financial proof. But there was one more truth I needed before this machine could move forward. One answer that had nothing to do with Victor Sorin or Heartland Senior Solutions or federal wire fraud. An answer that went back 21 years to a hospital delivery room where I'd held a newborn boy and believed with every cell in my body that he was mine. Monday morning, I would walk into a lab and take a DNA test. 72 hours after that, I would know whether the last foundation still standing beneath my life was real or whether Catherine had been lying about more than an affair. Have you checked? I was about to. The DNA test took 72 hours. The results took 3 seconds to read. The grief that followed had no timeline at all. Monday afternoon. Phoebe's office. The same 14th floor view of the Chicago River. The same mahogany desk. But the room felt smaller now. The walls closer, the air thinner. The report glowed on her laptop screen. Medical terminology. Lab certification numbers. Genetic marker charts that meant nothing to me. And at the bottom, in clinical black typeface, that meant everything. Probability of paternity. 0.0 to 0%. I read it 3 times. The numbers didn't change. Grant. Phoebe's voice came from somewhere far away. I closed the laptop, sat back, looked at my hands. The same hands that had held a newborn boy 21 years ago in a delivery room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The same hands that had built a crib, assembled a bicycle, caught a baseball thrown wild by a 7-year-old who couldn't aim but tried anyway because his father was watching. He's not my son. The words came out flat. Factual. Like reading a blueprint notation. Load-bearing wall removed. Structure compromised. 21 years. Every birthday cake I'd carried while everyone sang. Every parent-teacher conference where they told me what a good kid he was. Every time Nolan had fallen asleep on my shoulder during long car rides. Every time he'd said, "I love you, Dad," before bed. And I'd said it back, and meant it with everything I had. "I'm so sorry," Phoebe said quietly. I stood. Walked to the window. The river moved below, gray and indifferent. How long do you think she's known? Given that the paternity predates the marriage, she's known from the beginning. From the beginning. Before the wedding. Before the vows. Before 26 years of shared meals and shared beds, and the shared illusion that we were building something honest. "Grant." Phoebe's voice was sharp now. She came around the desk and stood beside me. "Don't do this. Don't let Catherine's lie poison what you built with that boy. What I built was based on your choice. Your choice to love him, to show up every morning, to teach him to ride a bike and drive a car and be a decent human being." She pointed back at the closed laptop. "That test tells you about chromosomes. It tells you nothing about fatherhood. But he's not. He's your son, Grant. You raised him. Biology doesn't determine that. Love does. Time does. 21 years of presence does." Her eyes were fierce. "That number on the screen is not 0. What you've given Nolan for 2 decades is everything." Something cracked open in my chest. Not anger. Not betrayal. Something deeper and older and harder to name. The feeling of the ground shifting beneath a foundation you'd believed was solid. I drove home in silence. No radio. No phone calls. Just the sound of tires on pavement and the hum of an engine. And 21 years of memories replaying behind my eyes. The house was empty. Catherine was at work. Or with Victor. Or wherever she went on Monday afternoons now. It didn't matter. What mattered was the filing cabinet in our bedroom closet, where we kept insurance documents, tax returns, and the kind of paperwork that accumulates across a lifetime shared with someone. I needed documents for Phoebe. Marriage certificate. Property deeds. Account statements. I opened the closet, pulled the cabinet drawer, and started sorting through folders. That's when I found the shoebox. It was on the floor behind the cabinet, pushed against the back wall. A plain brown box from a shoe brand Catherine hadn't worn in years. I almost left it, almost pushed it aside, and kept looking for tax documents. But something about its placement felt deliberate. Not forgotten. Hidden. I opened it. Letters. 7 of them. Handwritten on plain white stationery. Catherine's handwriting. Each one folded carefully. Sealed in an envelope. Addressed to me. My name on every one. Grant. None of them had been sent. I sat on the bedroom floor with the box in my lap and opened the oldest one first. The paper was yellowed. The ink slightly faded. Dated 15 years ago. Grant. Nolan said his first word today. Dada. You picked him up and spun him around, and your face was the happiest I've ever seen it. I almost told you the truth tonight. I had the words ready, but then you looked at me and said, "We made something perfect." And I couldn't. I'm sorry. I couldn't. My hands were steady. My breathing was not. The second letter. 12 years ago. He asked me today why his eyes are different from yours. I told him he got them from my side of the family. He believed me. You would have believed me too. That's what makes this so terrible. You trust me completely, and I don't deserve it. The fourth letter. 8 years ago. You coached his Little League team this spring. He worships you. After the last game, he told his friend, "My dad's the best coach in the whole league." I was standing behind the bleachers and heard it. I sat in the car and cried for 20 minutes. How can I destroy that? How can I take that away from both of you? The sixth letter. 5 years ago. Sometimes I think you already know. The way you look at him. The way you look at me after. But then you smile and ask about dinner, and I realize you don't. You have no idea. And every day I don't tell you is another day I choose the lie over the truth. I hate myself for it. But I'm more afraid of losing you than I am of hating myself. The seventh letter. 3 years ago. The last one. I'm a coward, Grant. You deserve the truth. You've always deserved it. But I'm terrified. Terrified of losing you. Terrified of losing Nolan. Terrified that if you know, you'll look at him differently. And he doesn't deserve that. He loves you. You're his whole world. I can't be the one who breaks that. So I'll keep this letter with the others. In a box. In a closet. Where the truth goes to hide when the person holding it is too weak to let it out. I sat in the darkness of our bedroom closet, 7 letters in my lap, and understood something I hadn't expected to understand. Catherine had known. Every day for 21 years, she had known. And every day, she had chosen silence. Not out of cruelty, out of cowardice. The kind that grows from loving something so much you can't bear the thought of destroying it, even when the destruction is the only honest thing left to do. Understanding isn't forgiveness, but it's the beginning of letting go. I put the letters back in the shoebox. Placed the box on the top shelf of my closet. Not hidden, not destroyed, just waiting. Like the conversation I would eventually have with Nolan. After graduation. After he'd built enough of his own life to absorb something this heavy without collapsing under it. He was my son. 21 years of showing up. Every bedtime story. Every driving lesson. Every quiet moment of pride when he solved a problem, or helped a stranger, or became a little more like the man I hoped he'd be. That was fatherhood. Not a genetic marker on a lab report. Not a probability percentage. Presence. Choice. Love. I pulled out my phone. 2 texts. To Phoebe. File everything Monday. Freeze the accounts. I'm ready. To Walt. Set up the final meeting with Elena. It's time to build the trap. I waited until a Tuesday. Not because Tuesdays held any particular significance in our marriage, but because Catherine had no evening meetings on Tuesdays. No hospital board dinners. No yoga with friends. No convenient alibis that she could deploy the way a soldier deploys smoke grenades, quick, instinctive. Designed to obscure. October 15th, Nolan was back at Northwestern for midterms. The house on Fullerton Avenue was quiet. The way it always got quiet in October, the lake wind pressing against the windows. The radiators clicking their ancient Morse code through the walls. I had spent the morning at the construction office pretending to review blueprints for a Lakeview condo project. In reality, I was reviewing my own blueprints. The ones I had been drafting for 19 days. I cooked dinner. Chicken marsala, Catherine's favorite. I opened a bottle of the 2018 Barolo we had been saving for our anniversary. I set the dining room table with the good plates. The ones we only used for Thanksgiving and Christmas. When Catherine walked through the front door at 6:47 p.m., she stopped in the hallway and tilted her head the way she always did when something surprised her. "What's the occasion?" she asked. 26 years, I said. "I thought we should talk about them," she smiled. It was the same smile she had given me outside the Palmer house 3 weeks earlier, warm on the surface, hollow underneath. I could see it now. The way the corners of her mouth moved a half-second before her eyes caught up. A rehearsed gesture. I wondered how many years that smile had been rehearsed, and how many years I had been too comfortable to notice. We ate. We talked about Nolan's classes, about the weather turning, about the new wing being added to the hospital. Catherine mentioned Dr. Soren's name twice casually. The way you mention a coworker you barely know. I let her talk. Every sentence she spoke was another strand of rope she was handing me. And I took each one without pulling. At 7:32 p.m., I cleared the plates. I poured 2 glasses of the Barolo. I sat back down across from her, and I placed a manila folder on the table between us. "What is that?" Catherine asked. "8 months of answers," I said. She stared at the folder the way a deer stares at headlights frozen, calculating, trying to decide whether to run left or right. I opened it for her. The first photograph was the one Walt had taken on June 14th. Catherine and Victor Soren walking into the Palmer house, his hand on the small of her back, her head tilted toward his shoulder. The timestamp read 6:04 p.m. "Grant, don't." I held up one hand. "Not yet." I turned to the second photograph. July 9th. The Fairmont, Chicago, room 1215. Catherine entering alone at 5:58 p.m. Victor arriving 11 minutes later with a bottle of champagne. I turned to the third. August 2nd. The same hotel. Same room. Same pattern. I laid out 12 photographs in a row, like dealing cards in a game she did not know she was playing. Catherine's face changed. The color drained from her cheeks in stages, first pink, then white, then a gray I had only seen once before, on the face of a witness at NCIS, who realized his lie had been recorded. Her hands trembled. She reached for the wine glass, then pulled back as though it might burn her. "How long?" I asked. She was silent for 11 seconds. I counted them the way I had been trained to count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Because silence is data. People who are innocent fill silence with protest. People who are guilty fill it with calculation. 14 months. She whispered. 14. Not 8. Not the 6 months Walt had documented. 14 months meant it started in August of last year. The same month I took Nolan to Colorado for his 20th birthday trip. The same month Catherine said she was attending a hospital leadership retreat in Milwaukee. There was no retreat. There was only Victor. "The money," I said. I pulled out the financial documents Miles had compiled. Bank statements showing 17 wire transfers from our joint savings account to Heartland Senior Solutions LLC. The total, $247,500. Each transfer was between $8,000 and $22,000, carefully structured to stay below the reporting threshold that would trigger automatic bank alerts. Smurfing, the same technique drug dealers used. Catherine had learned it from Victor, or Victor had taught it to her. Either way, it was federal. "I was going to pay it back," Catherine said. Her voice cracked on the word back, splitting it into 2 syllables. "He said it was an investment. A medical supply company. He showed me projections, spreadsheets, returns of 18%. He said we would double the money in 2 years, and I could put it all back before you noticed." "You believe that?" I believed him. She pressed her palms flat against the table, as though trying to steady the room itself. "Grant, you have to understand, he made me feel like I was part of something. Like I mattered outside of this house. Outside of the hospital. Outside of being someone's wife and someone's mother. He made me feel seen." I let those words hang in the air. They were supposed to hurt me, and they did. But pain is only useful if you process it. And I had been processing pain for 19 days. "He made 6 other women feel seen," I said quietly. I placed Elena's file on the table, the timeline of victims. Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and now Chicago. 6 cities. 6 women. 6 variations of the same script. Catherine read the first page, then the second. By the third page, she was crying not the controlled, dignified tears she used at funerals, but the raw, ugly kind that twisted her face into something I barely recognized. "Linda Marsh killed herself," I said. She was his first. Her daughter Elena has spent 8 years building this file. "You are not the love of his life, Catherine. You are line item number 6 on a spreadsheet." The words landed like stones thrown into still water. Catherine pressed her hands over her mouth. Her shoulders shook. I wanted to reach across the table and hold her the way I had held her for 26 years, but I kept my hands on my side. Compassion could wait. Clarity could not. "There's one more thing," I said. I placed the DNA report on the table. The single page from GeneTech Diagnostics. Dated October 12th. Paternity probability, 0%. Nolan James Holloway was not my biological son. Catherine looked at the report. Then she looked at me. Then she looked back at the report. The silence lasted 23 seconds. "It was before Victor," she said. Her voice was barely audible. "A resident at the hospital. 21 years ago. It was one time, Grant. One time. I was going to tell you. But then Nolan was born. And he looked so much like my father. And I thought maybe it didn't matter." "It matters," I said. "But not the way you think." I closed the folder. I placed both hands flat on the table, mirroring her earlier gesture, but with a steadiness she could not match. "I love Nolan," I said. "That does not change. He is my son in every way that counts, and I will never tell him otherwise. Not now, not at his graduation, not ever. But you and I are done, Catherine. Phoebe is filing the papers tomorrow. And before those papers are filed, you are going to help me put Victor Soren in a place where he can never do this to another woman again." Catherine wiped her eyes. She looked at me the way she had looked at me on our wedding day, searching for something solid to hold on to. "How?" she asked. "You're going to wear a wire," I said. "And you're going to get him to confess everything." The radiator clicked. The wind pushed against the windows. Catherine Holloway, for the first time in 14 months, nodded. The FBI field office on West Roosevelt Road looked like every federal building I had ever entered: beige walls, fluorescent lights, and the particular silence of people who are paid to listen. Walt drove me there on October 17th at 8:14 a.m. Neither of us spoke during the 23-minute ride from Lincoln Park. Some mornings require silence the way wounds require gauze. Not because it fixes anything, but because it holds things in place. Special Agent Diana Reeves met us in a third-floor conference room with no windows and one camera mounted in the corner above the door. She was 46, sharp-jawed, with reading glasses perched on a chain around her neck and a handshake that could crack a walnut. Beside her sat a younger agent named Colton Price, who took notes on a yellow legal pad with the mechanical focus of a court stenographer. "Mr. Holloway," Reeves said, gesturing to a chair, "I've reviewed your materials. All of them." She tapped a stack of folders on the table: Miles's financial audit, Elena's 8-year dossier, Walt's surveillance photographs. "I'll be direct with you. We've been watching Victor Soren for 11 months. He appeared on our radar after a complaint filed in Cleveland last November. But complaints don't make cases. Evidence makes cases. And what you've brought me in the last 48 hours is more than my team has compiled in a year." She let that settle. I understood the subtext. Federal agencies move slowly because they have to. Private citizens with NCIS training and a personal grudge move fast because they can't afford not to. "We want to proceed with a consensual monitoring operation," Reeves continued. "Your wife has agreed to cooperate. That cooperation, combined with the documentary evidence, gives us probable cause for wire fraud, mail fraud, and money laundering across 6 jurisdictions. But the recording is the centerpiece. We need Victor Soren, in his own voice, describing the financial structure of his operation. Without that, a defense attorney will argue Catherine acted alone, or that the transfers were legitimate investments." "When?" I asked. "Thursday, October 19th. Your wife tells us Soren has scheduled a dinner at Alenia to discuss what he calls a Phase 2 expansion, a new LLC targeting senior care facilities in Louis in Kansas City. He's recruiting Catherine to co-sign incorporation documents. That dinner is our window." I looked at Walt. He sat with his arms folded, his jaw set in the expression I had come to recognize as controlled fury. He nodded once. "What does Catherine need to do?" I asked. Agent Price spoke for the first time. His voice was flat, procedural. She'll wear a modified undergarment with a micro-transmitter sewn into the fabric. Range is 600 feet. Our surveillance van will be parked on North Halsted, 1 block from the restaurant. She needs to keep Soren talking for a minimum of 40 minutes. Specifically, she needs to guide the conversation toward 3 topics. The origin of the Heartland Senior Solutions, LLC, the method of transferring funds below reporting thresholds, and his plans for future targets. And if he suspects something? I asked. Reeves removed her glasses and set them on the table. That's why we're spending 2 days preparing her. We'll run rehearsals tomorrow and Wednesday. Script scenarios, stress responses, body language coaching. Your wife isn't a trained operative, Mr. Holloway, but from what I've observed in our preliminary interview, she's highly motivated. Guilt is a powerful engine. I thought about Catherine sitting across from me 2 nights earlier, her face gray, her hands shaking, the word back splitting in half on her tongue. Guilt was not the word I would have chosen. Reckoning was closer. The next 48 hours moved with the mechanical precision of a military operation. On Wednesday morning, Catherine arrived at the field office at 9 a.m. for her second rehearsal. I was not allowed in the room, so I waited in the hallway with Walt and a vending machine coffee that tasted like regret dissolved in warm water. Through the closed door, I could hear Reeves's voice, calm, repetitive, patient, running Catherine through scenario after scenario. He says he wants to celebrate. What do you say? I say I'm excited about Street Lewis. He reaches for your hand. What do you do? I let him take it. I smile. He asks if Grant suspects anything. What do you say? A pause. Then Catherine's voice, quieter. I say, Grant is busy with the Lakeview project. He doesn't notice anything. I closed my eyes. The sentence was a lie wrapped inside a truth, wrapped inside another lie. And every layer of it cut in a different direction. Grant doesn't notice anything. For 26 years, that had been accurate. For the last 19 days, it was the most dangerous assumption Victor Soren could make. On Thursday morning, October 19th, the weather turned. A cold front rolled off Lake Michigan and pressed the temperature down to 41 degrees. The sky was the color of wet concrete. I stood at the kitchen window at 6:15 a.m. and watched the wind strip the last yellow leaves from the oak in our backyard. And I thought about the fact that by midnight, either Victor Soren would be recorded confessing to 6 counts of wire fraud, or Catherine would fail, and he would disappear to the next city with the next woman and the next carefully structured lie. Catherine came downstairs at 7:30. She wore a gray sweater and black pants, the outfit Reeves had approved because it was loose enough to conceal the transmitter without looking unusual. Her hair was pulled back. No jewelry except her wedding ring, which she wore because removing it would alert Victor to a change. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at me. I'm scared, she said. It was the most honest sentence she had spoken in 14 months. Good, I said. Scared means you understand what's at stake. She nodded. She picked up her car keys from the counter. She walked to the front door. Then she stopped, turned around, and said something I was not expecting. I know this doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know the person he turned me into is not the person I was when I married you. And it's not the person I want to be when this is over. I didn't respond. Some statements don't require answers. They require witnesses. At 7:48 p.m., Catherine Holloway walked into Alinea on North Halsted Street. In a surveillance van 1 block east, Agent Diana Reeves pressed a button, and a small green light confirmed the transmitter was live. In our living room on Fullerton Avenue, I sat on the couch with Walt beside me and my phone in my hand, waiting for a call that would either end this chapter or begin a worse one. The green light held steady. Catherine was inside. Victor was waiting, and somewhere in the space between a wire and a confession, the trap I had spent 23 days building was about to close. The call came at 9:41 p.m. I know the exact time because I had been staring at my phone for 113 minutes, and the screen had become a small rectangular universe, in which the only thing that mattered was whether it would light up with Reeves's number or stay dark. Walt sat beside me on the couch, motionless, his hands clasped between his knees. Neither of us had spoken since 8:15. The television was off. The only sound was the radiator clicking and the distant hum of traffic on Fullerton Avenue, and both of those sounds had become so familiar that they had ceased to be sounds at all. They were just the texture of waiting. When the phone buzzed, I answered before the first vibration finished. "We got it," Reeves said. Her voice was controlled, professional, but underneath the control was something I recognized from my years at NCIS, the quiet satisfaction of a case that had just broken open. 47 minutes of recorded conversation. He gave us everything. I closed my eyes. Walt put his hand on my shoulder. I let it stay. "Tell me," I said. Reeves walked me through it in the clinical, sequential manner of someone who had written hundreds of case summaries. Catherine had arrived at Alinea at 7:48 p.m. Victor was already seated at a corner table. Table 14, near the back wall, away from the main dining room. He had ordered a bottle of Chateau Margaux that cost more than most people's car payments. He stood when Catherine approached, kissed her on the cheek, and pulled out her chair. For the first 18 minutes, the conversation was personal. Victor talked about a medical conference in Scottsdale. He wanted them to attend together in November. He mentioned a villa in Tuscany he was considering purchasing. He told Catherine she looked beautiful, in a way that suggested he had said it to many women, and had perfected the rhythm of the sentence the way a musician perfects a scale through repetition, not feeling. Catherine steered the conversation at the 19-minute mark. She asked about Street Lewis. Phase 2. Victor said. The transmitter captured his voice with startling clarity, deep, measured, confident. The voice of a man who had never been caught and did not believe he could be. Kansas City and Street. Louis have the highest concentration of privately owned senior care facilities in the Midwest. 12 targets, all with annual budgets between 15 and 40 million. Same model as Chicago. We establish a medical supply consulting LLC, secure a co-signer with institutional access, that's you, Catherine, and begin routing procurement contracts through the entity. 15% markup on standard supplies, 22% on specialized equipment. The facilities never audit because the invoices match market rates within an acceptable variance. How much? Catherine asked. Her voice was steady. The rehearsals had worked. Conservatively, 600,000 in the first year. Possibly 8. The beauty of senior care is that the oversight is state level, not federal. State auditors are understaffed, underfunded, and they rotate every 18 months. By the time anyone looks closely, we've dissolved the LLC and moved the funds through 2 intermediary accounts into the holding company in Belize. I listened to Reeves repeat these words, and each sentence landed with the weight of a verdict. This was not a man who had made a mistake. This was a man who had built a system elegant, repeatable, designed to exploit the intersection of trust and bureaucratic weakness. He had done it in Minneapolis with Linda Marsh, in Indianapolis, Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and now Chicago, where my wife had become both his accomplice and his instrument. Catherine pushed further. At the 31-minute mark, she asked the question Reeves had coached her to ask, the one that would connect the Chicago operation to the prior victims. What happened in Minneapolis? You never talk about it. A pause on the recording. 3 seconds. Then Victor's voice. Lower now. Almost intimate. Minneapolis was the prototype. Linda was useful, but emotional. She started asking questions about the offshore accounts, threatened to go to the board. I had to restructure. The NDA handled the legal exposure, but she became erratic afterward. Unfortunate. Unfortunate. He used that word unfortunate to describe a woman who signed away her career, lost her marriage, and drove to an empty parking lot on a February night and ended her life in the front seat of a Honda Civic, Elena's mother. Reduced to a single adjective in the vocabulary of a man who measured human beings by their utility. Catherine did not break. I do not know how she held herself together in that moment, hearing the man she had trusted dismiss a dead woman as a logistical inconvenience. But she held. She asked 2 more questions about the Belize holding company and about how many women he had recruited before her. Victor answered both, with the casual precision of a professor explaining a syllabus. 6, he said. You're the 7th, but you're the most valuable. Your position at the hospital gives us access to procurement channels the others couldn't provide. At the 47-minute mark, Victor excused himself to use the restroom. Catherine signaled the waiter for the check. In the surveillance van, Reeves made a call to the U.S. Attorney's office. By the time Victor returned to the table, the arrest warrant was being drafted. Your wife is safe, Reeves told me. She's in the van now. She's shaken, but she held the line. I've seen trained informants fold under less pressure. I thanked her. It was an inadequate word for what I felt, but language has limits, and gratitude is one of the things that exists beyond them. After the call ended, I sat in the living room for a long time. Walt made coffee. He brought me a cup and sat back down without speaking. The radiator clicked. The wind pressed against the windows. Somewhere on the north side, a federal case was taking shape, warrants being typed, evidence being cataloged. The machinery of justice grinding into motion with the slow, deliberate force that distinguishes it from revenge. I thought about Elena Marsh sitting in that Lincoln Park coffee shop, pushing a banker's box across the table, with hands that had spent 8 years building a case out of grief. I thought about Linda Marsh in that parking lot, alone, believing she had no options left. I thought about the 6 women in 6 cities who had each believed they were the only one, each believing the same carefully constructed sentence. You're the only one who truly understands me. And I thought about Catherine. Not the Catherine who had betrayed me, that version I was learning to release, the way you release a breath you have been holding too long. But the Catherine who had walked into Alinea tonight wearing a wire under a gray sweater, terrified, and had sat across from the man who had dismantled her judgment and her integrity and had held steady for 47 minutes, while he confessed to destroying lives the way other men discuss quarterly earnings. That Catherine, I realized, was someone I could respect, not forgive. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. But respect, yes. That was possible. Walt looked at me. You okay? He asked. No, I said. But I'm closer. He nodded. We drank our coffee, and we waited for morning, when the next phase would begin. They took him on a Friday, October 20th, 7:22 a.m. Victor Sorin was staying at the Langham Hotel on North Wabash Avenue, a $500 a night suite with a view of the Chicago River and the kind of Egyptian cotton sheets that make a man believe his life is intouchable. He had checked in the previous Sunday under his own name, because men who have never been caught do not bother with aliases. Arrogance is its own kind of blindness, and Victor had been blind for a very long time. I was not there for the arrest. Reeves had made that clear during our final briefing on Thursday night. This is a federal operation, Mr. Holloway. You've done your part. Now let us do ours. I understood the logic. Civilian presence at an arrest creates complications, legal, procedural, emotional. But understanding logic and accepting it are different disciplines, and that morning I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I could not taste and waited for my phone to ring the way a man waits for a surgeon to walk out of an operating room. Walt was there. He had arrived at 6:30 with a bag of bagels from that place on Armitage that neither of us would ever remember the name of, and he sat across from me with his hands wrapped around a mug, steady as a dock piling. In the 24 days since he had shown me that 12-second video in the Palmer House lobby, my half-brother had become the most reliable person in my life. That thought carried a weight I was not yet ready to examine. The phone rang at 7:38 a.m. Reeves. Victor Sorin is in federal custody, she said. No incidents. He answered the door in a hotel bathrobe. When Agent Price showed him the warrant, he asked to call his attorney. That was his only statement. Did he resist? He didn't have time to resist. 4 agents, 2 in the hallway, 2 at the service entrance. The whole thing took 90 seconds. 90 seconds. 14 months of deception, $247,500 stolen from my family. 6 women, across 6 cities. 1 woman dead in a Minneapolis parking lot, and it ended in 90 seconds, with a man in a bathrobe asking for a lawyer. There is a particular kind of anticlimax that comes with justice, not the dramatic courtroom collapse you see in movies, but the quiet, procedural finality of handcuffs clicking shut in a hotel corridor at 7 in the morning. Justice does not roar. It clicks, Reeves continued. A simultaneous search warrant had been executed at Victor's secondary residence, a rented townhouse in River North that Catherine had never mentioned, because Catherine had never known it existed. Inside, agents found 3 laptops, 2 external hard drives, a safe containing $43,000 in cash, and a filing cabinet with documents related to 7 LLCs registered across 4 states. The Belize Holding Company records were on the primary laptop, password protected with a 12-character string that the Bureau's digital forensics team cracked in under 40 minutes. The scope is larger than we projected, Reeves said. Initial analysis suggests total fraud proceeds in excess of $3.4 million across all operations. Minneapolis alone accounts for $1.1 million. Chicago is approximately $680,000 when you include the procurement contracts he was routing through your wife's hospital. $680,000. Not the $247,500 I had tracked. Catherine's transfers were only the personal component, the money siphoned from our joint accounts. The institutional fraud, the phantom invoices routed through the hospital's procurement system, was nearly 3 times that amount. Catherine had been the door through which Victor accessed a much larger vault, and she had either not understood the full scope or had chosen not to look. I asked about Catherine's legal exposure. Reeves was measured in her response. The U.S. Attorney's Office will make that determination. Her cooperation is significant. The recording is the strongest single piece of evidence we have. That carries weight. But she co-signed the LLC incorporation documents, and several of the wire transfers originated from accounts bearing her signature. She's not clear. She's less exposed than she would be without the cooperation agreement, but she's not clear. After the call, I phoned Phoebe. She answered on the second ring. My sister had been sleeping with her phone on the nightstand since the day she filed the divorce petition. I gave her the details. She listened without interrupting, which was unusual for Phoebe, and then said, "I'll contact the U.S. Attorney's Office this afternoon. Catherine's criminal exposure affects the divorce settlement. If she's facing charges, her negotiating position drops to 0. We need to move quickly on the asset freeze." "How quickly?" "I'll have an emergency motion filed by Monday. Judge Carmichael owes me a favor from the Henderson case. We freeze the joint accounts, the brokerage, and the retirement funds. Catherine keeps her 401k, that's separate property, but everything else locks until the divorce is finalized." I hung up and looked at Walt. He was staring out the kitchen window at the oak tree. Its branches bare now, stripped clean by the October wind. "It's done," I said. "No," Walt said. He turned to face me. "The arrest is done. The investigation is done. But there are 2 things that aren't done, and you know what they are." I did. Elena and Nolan. The daughter of the woman Victor killed with indifference, and the son whose biological truth I carried like a stone in my chest. "Elena first," Walt said. "She's earned that." I picked up the phone and dialed Elena Marsh's number. She answered on the first ring, as though she had been holding the phone for 8 years, waiting for exactly this call. "They arrested him," I said. Silence. 5 seconds. 7. Then a sound I will carry with me for the rest of my life, a single, sharp exhale, followed by a sob that broke open like a dam giving way to a river it had held for far too long. Elena Marsh, 31 years old, who had been 19 when her mother died, and had spent every year since building a cathedral of evidence out of grief and determination, wept. I did not speak. Some moments belong entirely to the person living them, and the only thing a witness can offer is the dignity of silence. After a long time, Elena's voice returned. Thin, raw, but steady. "Thank you, Grant," she said. "Don't thank me," I said. "Thank your mother. She kept the records that started everything." Another pause. Then, "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "we make sure he never does this again." I ended the call and set the phone on the table. Walt looked at me. I looked at the bare oak tree outside the window. Somewhere in a federal holding cell on South Clark Street, Victor Soren was sitting in an orange jumpsuit, waiting for a lawyer who could not save him from 47 minutes of his own voice, describing how he had turned trust into a business model and women into line items. The radiator clicked. The wind pressed. And for the first time in 24 days, the silence in my house felt like something other than a lie. The divorce was finalized on November 8th at 2:15 p.m. in courtroom 1204 of the Richard J. Daley Center. I remember the courtroom had a water stain on the ceiling directly above the judge's bench, a brown oval, the shape of a closed eye, as though the building itself had grown tired of watching marriages dissolve. Judge Carmichael sat beneath it with the practiced neutrality of a man who had presided over 3,000 divorces and had learned to treat each one with identical detachment. Emotions were the litigant's business. His business was the law. Phoebe sat beside me in a charcoal suit, her briefcase open, her posture communicating a controlled ferocity that I had admired since we were children, and she had argued her way out of every punishment our father attempted. Across the aisle, Catherine sat with her attorney, a man named Douglas Fenn from a mid-tier loop firm, hired after her previous counsel withdrew upon learning about the federal investigation. Fenn was competent but outgunned. Phoebe had spent 28 years in family law the way a blacksmith spends years at the forge. She knew exactly where to strike and how hard. The settlement had been negotiated over 11 days of increasingly one-sided conversations. Catherine's cooperation with the FBI had kept her out of federal indictment. The U.S. Attorney's Office granted her limited immunity in exchange for her testimony, but the cooperation agreement did not extend to civil proceedings. In divorce court, she was a co-signer of a fraudulent LLC, a participant in structured financial transfers designed to evade banking regulations, and a spouse who had diverted $247,500 from joint accounts without her husband's knowledge or consent. Her bargaining position, as Phoebe had predicted, was approximately zero. The terms were as follows. The house on Fullerton Avenue, appraised at $1.2 million, went to me. The construction firm Holloway & Associates, valued at $680,000, including equipment, contracts, and commercial property, went to me. The joint retirement accounts totaling $1.4 million were divided. $1.1 million to me. $300,000 to Catherine. Catherine retained her individual $401k, valued at $185,000. The joint savings account, which had held $312,000 before Victor began his extraction, contained $64,500 at the time of the emergency freeze. That remainder went to me as partial restitution. Catherine would receive no spousal support. Under Illinois law, marital misconduct is a factor in maintenance determinations, and Phoebe presented the court with a misconduct portfolio that made Fenn visibly uncomfortable: the photographs, the financial records, the FBI cooperation agreement, and a statement from Agent Reeves confirming the scope of the fraud. Judge Carmichael reviewed the materials for 14 minutes, asked Fenn 2 questions, received 2 answers that satisfied no one, and approved the settlement without modification. The entire proceeding lasted 41 minutes. 26 years of marriage, reduced to 41 minutes of legal procedure in a room with a water stain on the ceiling. I signed the final document at 2:15 6 p.m. Catherine signed at 2:58 p.m. She did not look at me. Her hand was steady, which surprised me, because the last time I had watched her sign something, at the FBI field office on the cooperation agreement, her hand had trembled so badly that Agent Price offered her a second pen, thinking the first was defective. We walked out of the courtroom through separate exits. Phoebe and I took the elevator to the lobby. She carried her briefcase in one hand and put her other hand on my arm, a gesture so unlike my sister's usual professional reserve that it told me more than any words could have. "You did well," she said. "You did well," I corrected. I just sat there. Sitting there was the hardest part. And you know it. She was right. There is a particular discipline required to sit in a courtroom across from the person you shared a bed with for 26 years and treat them as a legal adversary. Every instinct trained into you by marriage compromise, accommodation, the reflexive desire to protect, has to be overridden by a different set of instructions. I had spent 20 years at NCIS learning to override instincts. I had never imagined I would need that training in a divorce proceeding. I drove home alone. The November light was thin and gray, the kind of light that makes Chicago look like a black and white photograph of itself. I parked in the driveway of the Fullerton house. My house now, entirely and solely mine, and sat in the car for 7 minutes, looking at the front door. The oak tree was completely bare. The flower beds Catherine had planted in spring were brown and collapsed. The porch light was on because I had forgotten to turn it off that morning, and it glowed in the afternoon gray like a small, unnecessary promise. Inside, the house was quiet. Not the quiet of waiting, which I had lived with for 24 days in October. A different quiet. The quiet of aftermath. The quiet of a room after the last guest has left, and the chairs are empty, and the glasses are still on the table. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. I opened my phone and looked at the photograph of Nolan that served as my lock screen taken at his high school graduation 3 years earlier, his arm around my shoulder, his smile wide and unguarded. My son, not by blood, not by biology, but by every breakfast I had made him, every homework assignment I had argued about, every basketball game I had attended, every night I had checked the locks on the doors to keep him safe. Walt had told me there were 2 things left unfinished. Elena was the first. That call had been made. The second was Nolan. I had decided, during the long October nights when sleep refused to come, that I would not tell Nolan about the DNA results. Not now. Not at his graduation. Not ever unless he asked. And unless he was ready. The truth about his biology belonged to Catherine, and it was her burden to carry or confess. My job was simpler and more permanent. To be his father. Not because a test confirmed it, but because 21 years of showing up had earned it. I would tell him about the divorce. That conversation would happen this weekend, when he came home from Northwestern for the first time since the arrest. I would sit him down in this kitchen, at this table, and I would explain that his mother and I were separating. I would not explain why. Not the affair, not the fraud, not Victor Sorin. Nolan was 21 years old, and he deserved to form his own relationship with his mother, without my anger becoming the lens through which he saw her. That restraint, choosing what to reveal and what to withhold, was the most difficult decision I had made in this entire ordeal. Harder than hiring Miles. Harder than confronting Catherine. Harder than sitting in a courtroom while a judge divided my life into columns on a spreadsheet. Because withholding the truth from someone you love requires you to carry the weight of that truth alone. And loneliness is the price of protection. My phone buzzed. A text from Nolan. Coming home Saturday morning. Can we do deep dish at Lou Malnati's? I typed back. Already planning on it. I set the phone down. The coffee was warm. The house was mine. The oak tree stood bare outside the window, stripped down to its essential architecture. No leaves, no color, no pretense. Just the structure that had always been there, strong enough to survive the winter, and patient enough to wait for spring. Nolan arrived on Saturday morning at 10:17, driving the used Civic I had bought him for his 20th birthday. The same year, Catherine told me she was attending a leadership retreat in Milwaukee. The same year everything began and I did not know it. He pulled into the driveway, unfolded himself from the car the way tall young men always do, and walked to the front door carrying a backpack over one shoulder and a Northwestern hoodie that had seen better semesters. "Dad," he said, and hugged me. The word landed differently now. Not because it meant less, but because I understood its full weight, in a way I had not understood 6 weeks ago. Dad, a word that has nothing to do with chromosomes and everything to do with accumulated mornings, the pancakes, the arguments about curfew, the time I taught him to drive in an empty church parking lot on North Avenue, and he almost took out a fire hydrant, and we both laughed until our ribs ached. 21 years of mornings, no test could subtract them. We drove to Lou Malnati's on North State Street and sat in a corner booth with a deep dish pepperoni between us and 2 glasses of Coke. Because Nolan still ordered Coke at restaurants the way he had since he was 6, and some habits are too valuable to outgrow. I let him eat first. He talked about midterms, a mechanical engineering exam that had destroyed him, a statistics professor he admired, a group project on bridge load calculations that had consumed 3 weeks of his life. I listened to every word the way a man listens to music he is afraid might stop. His voice, his gestures, the way he tilted his head when making a point. These were mine, not by genetics, by proximity, by the slow, invisible transfer of mannerisms that happens when 2 people share a breakfast table for 2 decades. After the second slice, I set down my fork. "Nolan, your mother and I have finalized our divorce." He stopped chewing. He looked at me with the expression I had seen once before, the night I told him his grandmother Margaret had passed, when he was 14. Not shock exactly, but the sudden recognition that the ground beneath a familiar structure had shifted. "When?" he asked. "This past Thursday." Why? I had rehearsed this answer for 11 days. I had written it down, revised it, spoken it aloud in the empty kitchen at 2 in the morning to make sure the words carried the right weight and no more. Your mother and I grew apart in ways that became irreconcilable. There were breaches of trust, financial and personal, that made continuing the marriage impossible. I won't go into the details, because those details belong to the marriage, not to you. What belongs to you is this: both of your parents love you. That has not changed, and it will not change. Nolan set his pizza down. He wiped his hands on a napkin with slow, deliberate movements that reminded me of myself, the habit of using physical tasks to buy time for emotional processing. Another transferred mannerism. Another proof that fatherhood is practice, not biology. "Is Mom okay?" he asked. The question split me open. Not because it was unexpected I had anticipated it, but because it revealed the architecture of my son's character. His first instinct, upon learning that his family had fractured, was to ask about the well-being of the person who had caused the fracture. That was not Catherine's instinct. That was not mine either. That was something Nolan had built on his own, and it was better than anything either of his parents could claim. "She's managing," I said. "She's staying with her sister in Evanston for now. She wants to see you when you're ready." "I'm ready now," he said. "Then call her." "That's between you and her." He nodded. We ate in silence for a while. The restaurant hummed around us, families at tables, waiters carrying trays, the particular noise of a place where people gather to share meals and pretend the world outside the windows is manageable. Nolan finished his 3rd slice, drank his Coke, and looked at me again. "Dad, is there something else you're not telling me?" The question hit like a sniper round, perfectly aimed, completely unexpected. I looked at my son, and for a fraction of a second, the DNA report flashed behind my eyes. Paternity probability: 0%. A single page that could rewrite 21 years of his identity. "There are always things parents don't tell their children," I said carefully. "Not because they're hiding something, but because some information serves no purpose except to cause pain. If there ever comes a time when you need to know something I haven't told you, I will tell you. That's my promise. Nolan studied my face the way engineering students study blueprints, looking for stress points, load-bearing weaknesses, places where the structure might fail under pressure. Whatever he found, it satisfied him. "Okay," he said. "I trust you." 3 words. Heavier than the settlement papers, heavier than the DNA report, heavier than everything Victor Sorin had stolen from my family combined. I trust you. A son's faith in his father, offered freely, without conditions. In a pizza restaurant, on a Saturday afternoon, I drove him home. We spent the rest of the day doing nothing in particular, watching football, arguing about whether the Bears had any realistic shot at the playoffs. They did not. Ordering Thai food for dinner, because neither of us wanted to cook. At 9:30 p.m., Nolan called Catherine from his bedroom. I heard his muffled voice through the door, but did not listen. That conversation was his. He came out 20 minutes later. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady. "She cried," he said. "She said she was sorry." "She is sorry," I said. Whatever else Catherine had done, her love for Nolan was not among the things she had faked. Nolan sat down on the couch beside me. He did not say anything else. He picked up the remote, turned on SportsCenter, and leaned his shoulder against mine the way he used to when he was small and the world was too large, and the only solid thing in it was the person sitting next to him. We stayed like that for a long time. The next morning, after Nolan drove back to Evanston to pack before returning to campus, I stood in the kitchen and called Elena Marsh. She answered on the second ring. "The trial date is set," she said. "February 10th. The U.S. Attorney wants me to testify. And Grant, they want you too." "I'll be there," I said. "One more thing," Elena said. Her voice shifted softer, less certain. I was thinking, after the trial, maybe we could have dinner. Not about the case. Not about Victor. Just dinner. The oak tree outside the window had been bare for weeks. But that morning, in the thin November light, I noticed something I had not seen before. Small buds forming along the lowest branch. Barely visible, easily missed. But present. "I'd like that," I said. The Everett McKinley Dirksen Federal Building stands on South Dearborn Street like a monument to consequence, 27 floors of glass and steel, and the accumulated gravity of every decision that has ever been weighed inside. Its courtrooms. I had entered federal buildings before, during my years at NCIS, but always as an investigator, never as a witness. The distinction mattered more than I expected. Investigators carry questions. Witnesses carry answers. And answers are heavier. February 10th. Courtroom 1919. Judge Patricia Albright presiding. The gallery was full. Reporters from the Tribune and Sun-Times in the back rows, federal agents along the side wall, and in the second row, 5 women I had never met, but whose stories I knew intimately from Elena's files. The victims: Indianapolis, Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Minneapolis, represented not by Linda Marsh, who could no longer speak for herself, but by a framed photograph Elena had placed on the bench beside her. A small act of defiance against erasure. Victor Sorin entered the courtroom in a navy suit, his wrists free of handcuffs per courtroom protocol, his posture as upright as the day I had watched him walk into the Palmer house with my wife. Prison had not diminished him physically. He still carried himself with the bearing of a man who believed the room owed him attention. His attorney, a federal defense specialist named Harold Keene from a Washington firm, sat beside him with the expression of a man who had reviewed the evidence and understood that his primary function was damage control, not acquittal. The prosecution was led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Danielle Cortez, a woman in her early 40s with a voice that carried the particular clarity of someone who had learned to make complex things simple for juries. She opened with the numbers. 7 LLCs across 6 states. $3.4 million in total fraud proceeds. 7 women recruited over 11 years. 1 dead. This is not a case about a complicated financial instrument, Cortez told the jury. This is a case about a man who identified vulnerable, accomplished women, manufactured intimacy, and used that manufactured intimacy as a key to unlock their professional and financial resources. He did it in Minneapolis. He did it in Indianapolis. He did it in Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Chicago. He did it with the same script, the same false promises, and the same exit strategy. The only variable was the woman. The system never changed. Elena testified first. She walked to the stand carrying nothing. No notes. No documents. Just the 8 years she had spent building a case out of her mother's death. She spoke for 42 minutes. She described finding her mother's financial records in a storage unit 3 months after the funeral. She described the pattern she uncovered: the LLC formations, the inflated invoices, the structured transfers. She described tracking Victor from Minneapolis to Indianapolis, then city by city, year by year, assembling a timeline that federal investigators had not managed to build. When Cortez asked her why she had continued for 8 years, Elena's answer was 3 sentences long. Because my mother couldn't. Because the next woman wouldn't know. Because silence is how men like him survive. The courtroom was quiet after that. Not the polite quiet of procedural decorum, but the particular silence that falls when a truth has been spoken that no one in the room can dispute. I testified in the afternoon session. Cortez walked me through the timeline, the video at the Palmer House, the hiring of Miles Crenshaw, the financial discoveries, the confrontation with Catherine, the FBI operation. I spoke for 37 minutes. I used the language I had learned at NCIS: precise, sequential, stripped of emotion. Dates, amounts, timestamps, names. The jury did not need my anger. They needed my evidence. Keene's cross-examination lasted 14 minutes. He attempted 3 angles. That Catherine had acted independently in the financial transfers, that Grant's emotional state compromised his objectivity, and that Walt's surveillance constituted an invasion of privacy. Cortez objected to the first on relevance. The judge sustained. I answered the second by reciting my NCIS credentials and 20 years of investigative experience. The third collapsed when Keene realized Walt's surveillance had been conducted in public spaces and required no warrant. Catherine testified on the second day. She wore a gray dress, the same shade as the sweater she had worn to Alenia, and she spoke with a voice that trembled at the edges but held its center. She confirmed the affair. She confirmed the LLC co-signature. She confirmed the wire transfers. And she confirmed the recorded conversation, authenticating Victor's voice and his statements about Phase 2, the Belize accounts, and the previous victims. When Cortez played the 47-minute recording for the jury, I watched their faces. 12 people listening to a man describe human beings as financial instruments, describe a woman's suicide as unfortunate, describe his system of exploitation with the casual precision of a man explaining a recurring revenue model. By the time the recording ended, 3 jurors had visibly shifted in their seats. One woman in the front row had pressed her hand flat against her sternum, as though trying to keep something inside from escaping. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 11 minutes. They returned at 6:22 p.m. with a verdict on all counts. Guilty. 12 counts of wire fraud. 8 counts of mail fraud. 4 counts of money laundering. 2 counts of conspiracy to commit bank fraud. Victor Sorin stood motionless as the verdicts were read. His face betrayed nothing. He had spent 11 years performing composure. And even now, at the end, the performance held. Sentencing was scheduled for March 15th, but Judge Albright, citing the scope of the fraud and the number of victims, elected to sentence immediately per her discretionary authority. She addressed Victor directly. Mr. Sorin, you exploited the trust of 7 women across 6 states over a period of 11 years. You treated human connection as a tool of financial extraction. One of your victims is no longer alive to see this day. The court finds that a sentence at the upper range of the federal guidelines is warranted. 24 years. Federal prison. No possibility of parole for a minimum of 20. The gallery exhaled. Not in celebration. Federal courtrooms do not permit applause, but in the collective release of held breath that accompanies the end of something that has been endured for too long. Elena sat beside me, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the bench where her mother's photograph still rested. She did not cry. She had spent 8 years crying. What remained was something quieter and more durable, the stillness of a woman who had kept a promise to someone who could no longer hear it. I walked out of the Dirksen building at 7:04 p.m. into the February cold. Walt was waiting on the sidewalk, his hands in his coat pockets, his breath making small clouds in the night air. Elena walked beside me. Phoebe was already in her car, the engine running, the heater on. We stood there for a moment, the four of us on a sidewalk in downtown Chicago, under a sky that was clear for the first time in weeks. Stars visible. Wind still. The city moving around us with its usual indifference to individual stories, the same way rivers are indifferent to the stones beneath them. "It's over," Walt said. "No," Elena said quietly. She looked at the sky. "It's just the first thing that isn't broken." Thanksgiving fell on November 28th that year, 5 weeks after the divorce and 17 days before the trial that would send Victor Sorin away for 24 years. But on that Thursday morning, standing in my kitchen on Fullerton Avenue at 6:15 a.m., with flour on my hands and a 22-pound turkey sitting on the counter like a question I was not entirely sure how to answer, none of that mattered. What mattered was the table. I had extended it. The dining room table, solid walnut, bought at an estate sale in Wicker Park 14 years ago, had 2 leaves stored in the hallway closet that we never used because we never needed them. For 14 years, the table seated 4. Catherine, Grant, Nolan, and an empty chair we kept because the set came with 4, and removing one seemed like an admission neither of us wanted to name. That morning, I pulled out both leaves and set it for 7. Walt arrived first, at 9:30, carrying a sweet potato casserole he claimed to have made himself but which smelled suspiciously like it came from the place on Division Street. He wore a navy button-down I had never seen ironed, the collar stiff with effort. My half-brother, who had spent 4 years working as a janitor to find me, who had shown me a 12-second video that dismantled my marriage and rebuilt my family in the same motion, stood in my doorway, looking like a man who was not sure he belonged at a holiday dinner. "Get in here," I said. He smiled. It was the first time I had seen Walt Brogan smile without reservation, and it changed his entire face, the same jawline as mine, the same deep-set eyes we had both inherited from Margaret, but arranged in an expression of unguarded warmth that I was still learning to recognize as something I was allowed to receive. Phoebe arrived at 10:15 with her husband Richard, a retired Chicago PD detective who spoke rarely and listened with the focused attention of a man who had spent 30 years in interrogation rooms. She carried pecan pie. Richard carried bourbon. Miles Crenshaw came at 11. 0 inches his usual leather jacket, coffee in hand. Walt had insisted I invite him. "He found the money," Walt said. "Without the money, there's no case." Elena arrived last. She walked through the front door at 11:30, carrying a bottle of wine and a small frame wrapped in brown paper. She wore a green dress, and her hair was down, and she looked like someone who had decided, after a very long time, to stop carrying the weight of the past into every room she entered. "This is for you," she said. Inside the frame was a photograph, black and white, slightly faded, of a woman in her mid-40s standing on a dock at the edge of a lake, her hair blown sideways by wind, her smile wide and unposed. Linda Marsh. Taken in the summer of 2009, 2 years before Victor arrived in Minneapolis and rearranged her mother's life into something unrecognizable. "She would have liked you," Elena said. I set the photograph on the kitchen windowsill, next to the window that overlooked the oak tree. The buds I had noticed weeks ago had opened slightly, not leaves, not yet. But the promise of them, Small green points pressing outward against the cold. Trees do not hurry. They persist. And persistence, I was learning, is its own form of courage. We sat down at 1 p.m. 7 people at a table built for 4, extended for the first time in 14 years. Walt at one end, Grant at the other. Nolan between Phoebe and Richard. Miles beside Elena. The turkey was imperfect, slightly overdone on the left side, because my oven never heated evenly, and Catherine had always compensated by rotating the pan at the 90-minute mark, a detail I had not known until she was no longer there to perform it. Nobody minded. Nolan said grace. This surprised me because we were not a religious family. But he bowed his head and said, I'm grateful for the people at this table. Some of you I've known my whole life. Some of you I just met. But you're all here, and that matters more than I know how to say. He paused. Also, I'm grateful this turkey is edible, because Dad has never cooked one before, and I had real concerns. The table laughed. Walt laughed the loudest. A deep, rolling sound that filled the dining room, and I realized it was the same laugh our mother must have had. The kind that doesn't ask permission. After dinner, Miles and Richard washed dishes while Phoebe organized leftovers with prosecutorial efficiency. Nolan showed Walt his bridge load calculations on his laptop, and Walt asked questions with the genuine curiosity of a man who had spent his life investigating people and had never considered investigating structures. Elena and I stood on the back porch. 40 degrees. The wind coming off the lake with its usual insistence. Our shoulders close enough to touch. My mother spent the last year of her life believing she was alone, Elena said. She was looking at the oak tree. She wasn't. She just couldn't see the people who would come after. She started everything. I said, no. Elena turned to face me. A man in a parking garage started everything. He showed you a video, and you chose to look. That's where it started. With a choice. I thought about Walt pressing play on a phone screen in a hotel lobby. About the 12 seconds that separated the life I had from the life I was building. Inside, through the kitchen window, I could see the table extended. Full. Flowers still on the counter. Glasses half empty. 7 chairs occupied by people who had arrived through separate doors and had found, in the imperfect arithmetic of a Thanksgiving dinner, something that resembled family. Not the family I had planned, but a family built from the wreckage of the one that broke stronger at the fractured points. The way welded steel is stronger than the original metal, because it has been tested by heat and has survived. The radiator clicked inside the house. The wind pressed against the porch, and Grant Holloway, 55 years old, ex-NCIS, construction firm owner, divorced father of a son who was his in every way that mattered, stood on his back porch on Thanksgiving night and felt something he had not felt since September 26th, the night a janitor showed him a video and whispered, especially from me, peace, not the peace of resolution, not the peace of answers, but the tentative, fragile, hard-won peace of a man who had walked through betrayal and emerged on the other side with his hands open, ready to build again. The oak tree stood in the yard, bare and patient, waiting for spring.